Welcome to the podcast. Súbele volumen. Conversation with the people who were with me. In the world of TV. Carlos tonight. Carlos tonight. Historias de un reportero. Carlos tonight. Carlos tonight. Dale que viene lo bueno.
Hey everybody, bienvenidos and welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for listening and of course for watching. Before we get things started, I want to invite you to check out my website. That's carlostonight.com. There you can find the latest information about the podcast, see upcoming guests, and check out past episodes. That's carlostonight.com. And this week, I'm so excited to introduce you to my guest. She's a playwright, and she's getting ready to premiere her play, A Skeptic and a Bruja, which is coming to Sarasota, Florida on April 1st. Thank you so much, Rosa Fernandez, for joining me. I know you're very busy. Thanks for taking the time. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Cool. Yeah, glad to have you on. So your play, it's a comedy, it's horror, mystery, all mixed in. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would describe it as like a horror, a haunted house play that's sort of like a dark comedy. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of, the dark side of things, but there's also, I hope, a lot of comedy mixed in. So.
Tell us the exact moment when you came up with the idea for your play.
So I'm not sure that I remember the exact moment, but I remember the genesis of it came from I was watching BuzzFeed Unsolved, which of course is, a skeptic and a believer doing ghost hunting and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, I've been watching the show for a while and they've never caught any proof that was indisputable, or you can look at it and say, oh yeah, there's ghosts are for sure real. Right. So I thought to myself, what would happen if in one of these TV shows, we got indisputable proof that ghosts exist. Right. So that's where it started. And that was, I thought that I wrote down, I still have the Google Doc where I just write down ideas I have for plays and stuff like that. And that's where it started. And here we are, I think it's 2 years in, and it's a completely different play, but I'm really happy with where it's at right now. So feeling really good about it.
So are you a believer or a skeptic?
Oh, that's 100% a believer. 100%.
Me too.
Yeah.
How difficult do you think being a playwright is?
It's funny. I was in a workshop yesterday and somebody said that playwriting is one of the hardest forms of writing because you're writing in 3D. And that to me, I was like, yes, because you could be a novelist and you can write thousands of pages. And that almost seems preferable to me. I'd rather write 1,000 pages than have to write, we'll say 90 to 100 really, really good pages that are going to take you through this roller coaster ride of emotions in 90 minutes to an hour. I mean, right, 90 minutes to 2 hours. I think I think it's hard. It's what I will say. And sometimes I wonder why I do it at all.
What got you interested in the first place?
That's a great question. So I went to school for theater. And I met my husband in college. We had kids really quick. So we didn't spend a ton of time in New York City, which is, where we went to school for theater. And then we ended up moving to Buffalo pretty quickly after that. And so I started trying to do theater locally. And what I realized is there wasn't a ton of theater, a ton of opportunities for someone who looks like me. And that, after a while, it kind of is disheartening. And I think a lot of Latinos, and people of color in general experience that. It's just, there's not a lot of opportunity for, if you look a certain way, if you sound a certain way. So I basically made the decision that I was going to take a step back from acting, and I was going to start to write I think I just kind of fell into it organically. When I first moved here, I was a part of like a workshop because I had this idea for a play. And then as the years have gone by, I've become very adamant about writing for the community, for my community, for my beloved community, and for writing roles for people who I don't see represented on stage. That's how I got into it.
How bad are we hurting for Latino playwrights, do you think?
Oh gosh, I don't think we're hurting for them. I think that they're not being given as many opportunities. Because oh my God, I was already gonna throw in my Spanish. I was gonna desafortunadamente, but straight up, like, unfortunately, we are probably the largest group that comes out to the theater, that consumes media. We're talking about movies, TV shows, video games. We're probably the largest demographic that consumes media, but we're probably the least represented in said media. And then we've started to see a shift for like, oh, well, the Latino community it's obviously like they're coming out to the theaters, so let's make art for them, but it's still not 100% being written by us. And that's a problem in and of itself, because how are you going to say it's for us if it's not being written by us, if it's not being directed by us? I can name off the top of my head amazing playwrights that are writing really cool work that I'm excited about, work that like I get really hyped about. And so I don't think it's a shortage of playwrights or writers. I think that's an excuse that people use, like, oh, well, we can't find the writers. It's like, I can name off the top of my head amazing writers, and actually writers that have, like written for Netflix and like, they've done really cool stuff. So I don't think it's that we have a shortage. I do think that it's one of the most underpaid roles that you can have. So that's why you see a lot of playwrights start to write for TV, because that's where the money is.
Right.
But it's different, it's very different. Writing for theater.
I can imagine,
yeah. So, yeah.
So what was it like, thank you. What was it like for you seeing all the pieces of your latest production come together? Like from writing to casting to finally, April 1st getting ready to debut?
Yeah, it has been really cool. And I think it's because of the collaborators that I've been working with. Urbanite Theater, they're awesome. Like they've given me a lot of freedom, and they've just been like, do whatever you want. It was originally part of the Modern Works Festival that they host every year. And I completely rewrote the play during that week, during that festival. And there was never like a, hey, Rosa, we need to pump the brakes. Maybe you should wrap this up. Like, they've been so good about just like, do what you need, do whatever whatever feels good. And then the director, Maria Patrice Amon, she's like, I can honestly say that she has become one of my dearest friends, because she's just like that person in the theater community. Like, we're so lucky to have her in the theater community. Because she just knows how to write. Like, she knows how to work with writers. She knows exactly, like, when I'm freaking out about something, she knows to not, don't freak me out further. Yeah, she's very good about like, what do you need from me? And like, an amazing collaborator, amazing director, has such a great vision. And I have felt like really supported in my process. So it has felt really nice. The casting process was really cool, because I did bring up concerns that I had about the casting, because it was very much a story based in Afro-Latinx culture, which is very different, from white Latinx culture, right? And it was something that I wanted represented in the casting. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there's a lot of erasure of parts of our community, the indigenous parts, the Afro-Latinx parts. I think that that's something that I'm very passionate about, highlighting people who don't get represented as much on stage, and, whatever opportunities I get to highlight those people. So, yeah.
Cool. I used to do that as a reporter, like try and give the spotlight to those who may not have a voice out there.
Yeah.
and it's really important to do that. So if somebody's listening and watching this, and for those of us who've been to plays out there and wonder, you know, how does it all come together? What's the process like from point A to point B?
From the writing aspect, or from the like producing a show?
Yeah, like once you wrote it, like what happens after that?
That's so.
Did I say once you wrote it? I mean, once you write it.
Yeah. Like once I wrote it, I had to submit it to different opportunities for development and things like that. And I'm really bad at that because I have ADHD, and it's one of those things you have to crack away at. Like I'm terrible at it. I will maybe in a year submit, you know, to 5 to 10 opportunities, which is like way below average, just because I like it's bandwidth, right? So I do that, and then you get opportunities to develop it with different theater companies. After that, once it's in a good place, the idea is to get it in front of people who might want to produce it, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with Skeptic and Bruja, where I had a lot of development opportunities last year. And then Urbanite, once Modern Works was done, they said, you know, we'd like to bring it here and create a home for it. And then, I mean, they're so organized and really, really, it's pretty awesome because we're about 2 weeks out before we start rehearsal even. And I've already seen what the set's going to look like. We've already had a production meeting. So there's a lot of moving parts because you have to have a set designer, you have to have a lighting designer, you have to have a director, a costume designer. Like there's so many people involved. That's before you even get the actors in the room. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. We're going to do about a month-long rehearsal process, which is really cool. And I feel very lucky to be able to hear the actors daily. And the fact that I can be a part of that is a really big deal for me, because usually the playwright is not in the room at that point.
Oh, okay.
You know, not for a bad reason. I think that sometimes one of the hard parts of being a playwright is there is a part where you have to let go and let God, where you're just like, okay, this is my baby, but now I have to let people run with it. I don't have much of a problem with that, but I think that because of the process with this play, I'm really excited to be in the rehearsal process with actors and hearing the words and making changes as we go along. And then, yeah, it's going to go through a tech and then it's going to open, which is very, very exciting.
Wow. When you're describing that, I was thinking about the movie Tick Tick Boom on Netflix. Yeah. Have you watched it yet?
I haven't watched it yet. I know, that's crazy. I haven't watched it.
So good.
I've heard really good things. I have to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. So what's during this process, did you ever want to like give up at any point, and how did you overcome it?
That's you really asked the hard-hitting questions. I actually started writing this play. I had a first draft before the pandemic, and I had another draft due April of that year, the year 2020. And I remember there was just something that didn't feel right in my gut. I'm a very spiritual person. I was like drawing my tarot cards. I was getting the Tower. And I remember this was like February, March. I kept getting the Tower. And if you've ever seen the Tower, it's a really scary card where there's this literal tower. There's people falling out of it. It's very dramatic. And it represents violent change, not just change. It's change that is violent, change that is sudden. And I kept getting it. Every drawing, I'd be like, what the heck is going on? I went over to my sister's house and I was like, can you do a reading for me? Because I keep drawing the Tower. She drew the Tower for me. Oh, and I was like, what is going on? And then obviously March 2020 happens and I couldn't write. I could not write. I was completely blocked. I was like mourning, I feel like. It felt like I was just like in mourning that, like for the majority of 2020. And I didn't have the energy to go to the play, to read it, to sort of jumpstart that. And so I think what happened was that I had somebody reach out to me about another play that I wrote that's also getting its world premiere this year. And actually that was part of the reason I was blocked was, my show, Curse of the Puerto Ricans, was supposed to be premiering in 2020.
Mm.
Like my show got canceled. I was completely blocked with the new show. I was like, what's going on? Like, I can't do this. And then somebody contacted me from a college and they were like, hey, can we use Curse of the Puerto Ricans as part of our curriculum this year? We really want to, start highlighting BIPOC voices, right? And
That's awesome.
yeah. And so because it was like one of those very traditional, like living room dramas,
Yeah.
I think that's why people were like, oh yeah, like let's put this as part of our curriculum. And I actually asked that professor from Northwestern University, I said, can I audit your class? And she let me. And that kind of jump started it. It was like being in a room with other writers. That for me was so important. And I felt like I needed that. And that was how I was able to rewrite it, do another draft. And I was able to like get over my writer's block, but it was really hard. And sometimes I still struggle with it. It's something that I think is very closely tied to imposter syndrome for me. So I think that it's something that I'm probably going to have to work around for most of my career, but like I was able to get through it this year. I'm rather last year, but it's definitely something that has been challenging. We'll say. Yeah.
So when it premieres on April 1st, what's one thing that you want people to walk away with from checking out your play?
I want the people that I wrote it for, right? Like I want those people to see it, first of all, to laugh with it, to cry with it, and to just walk away with that feeling of I felt seen or I felt represented on that stage. That I think is the reason that I write. That's the reason that I, do the things that I do, is because I know what that feels like. You know what I mean? Like I know I went to, when I was in college, me and my husband went to see In the Heights on Broadway. And I remember what it felt like to sit in the seats and to be listening to salsa, merengue, like the music I grew up with. To see my culture represented on the stage was like so huge for me. Like that was so like, it was like, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Like that's the kind of effect that I would like to have on people. It's just like that feeling of, oh my gosh, I saw myself on stage, and that was such a big deal for me.
That's awesome. Did you say that was your first play you ever saw?
No.
What was your first play?
That's a good question. We weren't.
I'll go first. My friend Kevin in Chicago took me to see Phantom of the Opera. And it was like my very first time ever. That's my introduction to like theater and plays and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And then for my regular job, I get to cover them here in locally.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah. So you remember your first theater? Your first play?
I feel like I don't.
No.
Crazy.
I'm sure there's been a lot.
Yeah. And I was one of those like geeky high school theater kids. Like I did theater in high school. I remember watching a production that my friend, it's so funny. I feel like I'm coming full circle. In high school, there was somebody I did theater with who was doing a production of Oklahoma. And it's so funny because actually right after I get off of this call, we're meeting up with my friend who we went to school with. And he's doing the touring show of Oklahoma. That's like a regional production of it. So I feel like I'm coming full circle. But that's like one of the earliest theater memories that I can think of.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's Oklahoma, which is like, not exactly the theater that I'm so fun.
So if somebody's listening or watching and they want to be a playwright, what advice would you give them?
Just start writing. Like honestly, like that's the hardest thing to do, is to just write. There's a lot of resources out there, but as soon as possible, start writing and start reading plays. I think that's one of the things that's like the hardest for me to do now. To just sit with a play, read it, really break it down. Like what works about this play? What's really what gets me excited about this play, right? And I think theater is kind of tough because I think that not a lot of people, like people watch TV, people watch movies, people play video games. Not everybody goes to the theater, right? And in that way, a lot of people are saying that like theater is like a dying art. I hope that's not true, because it's one of those things that if you have been to a production that's moved you, it is a life-changing moment. It is something that's so pivotal for people that I really, really hope that it's not true that theater is going to die out. I don't think theater is sustainable the way it is right now because it's expensive. It's not paying its artists as much as they probably, you know, should be, like, enough to live, right?
Right.
But it's something that I think is really, I think it's a really important thing for us to experience.
So people who love the theater and they go to the theater, what do you think draws them in?
It's that electricity. It feels like I think that's why theater is so big in New York City, because New York City is, you know, as a person who was, and I apologize, everybody just got home, and so there's just chaos.
Oh, you're fine. We're wrapping up anyway.
Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
A lot of people go to the theater. What do you think draws them to going to check out a play or go to the local community theater?
Yeah, there's nothing like it in the world. Like you can watch a movie and you can have that same experience every time. Like I love movies.
Me too.
Love television. I will watch the same TV show over and over. I have comfort shows, right? But I know that every time I press play, I'm going to see exactly the same thing. Every single time it's going to be the same experience. The difference with theater is that it's electric, it's alive. And I think that's why it's so big in New York City. Because when you go to New York City, you feel that electricity, right? When you're walking down the street, you feel that like aliveness, right? And that's what theater is for me. It feels very, every time you see the same show, you will have a different experience. Because that night, an actor might have made a different choice. Something might have gone wrong. I've had silly experiences like that, especially in like educational theater when I was in college, where things would go wrong, and those were the most memorable moments. You know what I mean? Like I remember doing theater, actually, like this was here. It was a production of Water by the Spoonful, and I had this monologue about music. And I'm supposed to be a professor teaching a class, right? And I remember asking a question into the audience, and somebody answered one night. And like the whole gimmick was, I'm asking this question and no one is answering, and no one's answering, so I have to jump in with the answer. And then one night there was this like high school kid in the audience, and he just shouted out the answer, and I was like, oh my God, yes! How did you know that? It was really cool. And I think that you just can't replicate that. There's nothing on the world, like in the world, like it. So that's why I hope that theater is here to stay. But I also hope that it evolves and is more inclusive and it's more accessible to people who maybe have not been able to historically see theater, right?
Right. So I'll be in your neck of the woods next month. The family and I are going to Niagara Falls.
Oh, very exciting.
And then we're going to fly into New York City. Do you have any recommendations for like a theater show we should go check out?
Yeah. Let me take a look at when are you going to be in?
Third week in March.
Third week in March. There's a few things. There's a show by the playwright Nina Rain going on at Road Less Traveled Theater. And then I'm really bummed because I'm going to be gone the entire month of March. And then there's at the Kavinoki, I believe they're going to be doing Pride and Prejudice, which that might not be your shtick. I am 100% a Pride and Prejudice, a Jane Austen girl through and through. One of my favorite things was being able to play one of the Bennett sisters a few years ago. I was like, oh, bucket list, I got to do it. Okay. So there's like both of those shows I think should be, or rather Pride and Prejudice is probably the more family friendly one, but really, really fun stuff.
Cool. Okay. Skeptic. I had trouble saying that like earlier.
Yeah, no. It's
a Skeptic and a Bruja debuts in Sarasota, Florida, April 1st through May 1st. You talked a little bit about your other project. Do you have any other projects you want to mention?
Well, I did want to talk about Curse of the Puerto Ricans because then I'm coming to your neck of the woods in August. It's going to be done at Bishop Arts Theater Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Dallas. And actually, I wanted to also mention the playwright Frankie Gonzalez. He's in your neck of the woods too, and he does really cool work. And he's written for Netflix. So hint, hint.
Oh, okay. Come on the show.
Yeah, exactly. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But yeah, so I'm really excited because I get to meet get to meet Frankie in person because he's the resident playwright there. And they have the folks at Dallas, Teresa Coleman Wash. She's amazing. They've really built a beautiful theater that's for the community. So you have some really exciting stuff, really exciting theater stuff happening in your
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I can't wait. I went to a couple over the summer with my friend.
Yeah.
He invited me. There was like a group of us, and I was just like taken back and so amazed at everything.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I'm going to go on my show when I'm there in August.
Yes, for sure. I'm going to bring a crowd, okay?
Yeah.
So do you have a website or anything where people can find you, or you want to shoot out your Instagram?
I'm bad in that way. I do have an Instagram. I believe it's like Rosa Fernandez Playwright. It's like the Instagram.
We'll find you.
Yeah. And then if you're trying to get your foot in the door in terms of just reading plays, there's a website called thenewplayexchange.com. And there are basically it's all modern plays by living playwrights, and it's like $12 for the whole year. And you have access to an unlimited amount of plays by up and coming playwrights. So that's where you can also find me there.
Very good. Okay. I know you're a busy woman, so thank you so much for taking the time to be here and talk to me. I wish you nothing but success. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Carlos.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. It was written and produced by yours truly, Carlos Correa. My theme is by Sken, Galis. You can check out more information on the podcast at carlostonight.com.